Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Captain's Compass. Wanted to follow up last week's Captain's Compass from Erin, where she talked about ephemeral file storage, and talk about just where your data sits whenever you're using Shipyard. This is a common question we get inside of our demos, so I thought I would dedicate a Captain's Compass episode to just talking about a couple of different workflows and where your data would sit whenever those workflows are happening. So basing off of what Erin talked about last week, so in our ephemeral file storage system, each one of those fleets is going to have their own unique file system that are going to get wiped once the fleet is done running. So now I want to talk about what happens in the middle of that run. So we know what happens before and after. Let's talk about what happens in the middle. So jumping into our first workflow. So this first workflow is a Snowflake. It starts off with a Snowflake vessel that downloads data from Snowflake as a CSV. It runs a Python script to filter that data down to a couple of columns, and then we're going to email that file out. So talking about where your data is going in that workflow, so it's going to start with the Snowflake vessel. It's going to take that query, go to Snowflake using its API. It's going to download that file or download that query as a CSV. So once you download that query as a CSV, that data then enters Shipyard systems. So at this time, that data will sit inside of Shipyard's file systems. The next step is to filter that data using Python. So it's going to use that file that was generated and that currently exists in the file system. It's going to run some pandas on that to filter that. And so now you're going to have two files, the original file that's generated and then the second file that has the filtered columns. So at that point, you have two files with your data that are currently sitting in our file system. The last step is to email that file out. So that's going to email that file out of our system. The file is still going to be there, of course. But it's going to email a copy of that file to whoever you send that email to. And then with our ephemeral file storage system, like Erin talked about last week, that is going to be gone forever now. It's going to be completely gone. The data is going to be removed from our system. But during the time of that run, that Snowflake data does sit on our systems. So something, of course, that's one set. So that if you download anything, whether it's from a database like a Snowflake, a Redshift, a BigQuery, things like that, or if you just call an API using Python's request or curl command, anything like that you download data, or even from like a Google Drive or an S3 bucket or something like that, that data is going to sit on our systems during the running process and then deleted afterwards using our ephemeral file storage system. The second fleet I wanted to talk about is kind of what I would call like an orchestrating external systems type of fleet. Of course, a lot of the fleets that our customers use are a combination of these. They're not as kind of black and white as these two situations are. But the second one, it starts off executing a Fivetran sync, then executes a DBT cloud job, and then triggers a Tableau data source refresh. So in this situation, we're orchestrating three external systems. So we're kicking off runs in three external systems and waiting for them to finish, and then going into the next vessel. So in this kind of situation, none of your data is actually going to come inside a Shipyard. Unless, of course, you tell us to. So for DBT Cloud, for example, you could generate some artifacts and things like that. Those would be coming into our system just like that Snowflake file was. But if you choose not to generate those artifacts to save inside our Shipyard, if you orchestrate outside systems, like in this example, none of your proprietary data would actually come inside a Shipyard at all. It would all be sitting still in those external systems because all we're doing is saying, hey, run and refresh, or run transformations, or pull and extract, or refresh a Tableau dashboard, or things like that. So in a situation like that, the data is never going to enter our system at all. And then if you do get some artifacts from like the DBT Cloud job, for example, you have the option to email those out, send them to a Google Drive or a S3 bucket or anything like that. And then, of course, using our ephemeral file storage system, it's going to get deleted right after that. So I hope after the last two editions of Captain's Compass, so the last week's with Erin's with the ephemeral file storage, and then this week where we're just talking about where your data goes inside of a Shipyard run, I hope that you have a good idea of what happens with your data whenever you use Shipyard. We have the security features on the back end to make sure your data stays secure, but I always think it's great to kind of really walk through so that you can understand where your files are going to go, so that you can trust us whenever you're using Shipyard for your data operations. So if you have any more questions about kind of where your data goes when using Shipyard, feel free to pass this over, and we can do a third set of this series in Captain's Compass. But if not, I hope this will let you know where your files are going when you're using our system. We hope to see you next week on the next edition of Captain's Compass.